Hello and welcome to the CX Files for the 15th of June 2023. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal. It's a beautiful day here, Mark, in the beginning of what we're starting to see as summer in Eastern Canada. But I suspect even though it's wintertime in Brazil, you're probably warmer than I am.
Quite possibly. It is raining today, but it's the first rain that I've actually seen for weeks and weeks. And so, even including my trip to the UK, which was 2 weeks of constant sunshine. So
Yep.
something is definitely going on anyway.
Yep, you said it. You said it. And it's interesting because I was in touch with a friend of mine who's traveling through Australia, and he was telling me that in Brisbane, they're getting to the point of the winter inflection, and it was still nearly 30 degrees outside, and he was able to get out and do some running.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For the last week or so, it's just been sunny skies and high 20s here. So that would definitely be quite a nice summer's day back in the UK.
I agree. And there's a lot going on right now, Mark, not just in terms of CX, but you and I have been keeping up on WhatsApp about some of the concert schedules that are coming out from some of our favorite bands and some of the festivals that are taking place. I know that our mutual friend Leanne Rollins is going to be attending at least two or three of those over the course of the summer. And I have to say, the music scene in Europe seems to be infinitely more interesting than it does in North America at the moment. So I can foresee at least a couple of trips this summer over to catch bands such as Iron Maiden and Def Leppard that seem to be just touring like mad at the moment.
Well, yeah, you definitely just need to get back over to Europe, especially for some of those retro 80s concerts.
I've got my neon sunglasses ready to go.
Okay, well, talking about travel, we're talking about Africa today, aren't we? So why don't you introduce our guest for the week? Because this was one of the interviews that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, as you know, one of the things that was really coming up at the CX Outsourcers event a couple of weeks ago relates exactly to Africa. And I decided that, even though we focused on a lot of different African countries over the course of the CX Files history, it would be good to get an on-the-ground assessment about one of the most up-and-coming and interesting destinations in Africa currently, and that's Kenya. So with that in mind, I reached out to a longtime connection, Jeremiah Okello, who is based in Nairobi and is also the founder of Collins Consulting International. Jeremiah's got a real ear to the ground in regards to what's going on in Kenya, as well as the East Africa. Our conversation was fairly wide-ranging, but we stuck mainly to Kenya as a BPO delivery point. We talked a little bit about the history of Kenya going back to the early 2000s with the advent of KenCall and the work that homegrown outsourcer did in terms of making itself known to the rest of the world and putting Kenya on the map. We talked a little bit about the lull that Kenya had for several years and the fact that it's come back with a vengeance. Lots of different organizations are either already there or kicking the tires. It sells very well from the perspective of cost, of language skills, of quality. There's really, from a CX perspective, not much that you can say in regards to Kenya that wouldn't be positive. Jeremiah, to be fair, was also very blunt about some of the challenges that the industry faces, especially when it comes to attention from the government, understanding from the public sector about the importance of BPO and CX, and the extent to which the industry can count on support from different public bodies. So what I would say is it's, as I mentioned before, a wide-ranging discussion, and I think a very balanced one too about the positives of Kenya as a BPO destination, as well as some of the challenges that the country might face and the BPOs playing in Kenya at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that the discussion at CXO definitely did talk a lot about Africa and the development in Africa of BPO. But I think that, you're looking at maybe half a dozen countries or so in Africa as a continent, because you've really got to have that kind of mix of technology expertise kind of married up with the availability of people to support a big BPO operation as well. So Kenya definitely falls into that camp, but there's a few other places like Rwanda as well that I know
Yeah.
you've certainly been over there, and South Africa. Although South Africa has always been a big BPO destination for many years now, it's actually becoming quite well known for technology now, and so that's really
Yeah.
important for the development of AI and all this other stuff that we're seeing actually sort of feeding into BPO now as well.
You're absolutely right. South Africa and Rwanda would definitely fall into the category in sub-Saharan Africa of some of the countries of choice. I would also call out locations like Senegal, where I had the chance to visit a few years ago with our mutual friend Stephen Loyne to see some of the amazing work CX has got going on there. Ghana seems to be coming up more and more often. There's even discussions about locations such as Zimbabwe, which might not necessarily seem like an obvious choice, but is certainly, I think, shaking things up in many different aspects of offshore CX delivery. And going back to the interview with Jeremiah, I think, Mark, something that struck me is the fact that you've got entrepreneurs in Kenya. You've got entrepreneurs who come from a CX background that are willing to go the extra mile and to put their own organizations and their country out there as a logical location of choice for at least some work to be done by BPOs, thereby serving their clients. And it's refreshing. It's no longer just a case of what's happening in one or two established places. It's a whole bunch of different countries.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is it's not just about low cost. That's what we've seen for many years with Asia, is people just competing on cost. And so now we're actually starting to see expertise and the ability to partner with organizations as a real kind of differentiator. So, that's what I think is really exciting about what people like Jeremiah are doing.
Well, why don't we go straight to the interview? The CX Files is going international this week, and we are really excited to be doing a bit of a deep dive on what's happening in emerging Africa. And with that in mind, we're very fortunate to have a longtime friend of the podcast, Mr. Jeremiah Okello, who joins us from his home in Nairobi, Kenya. Jeremiah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Peter. I'm glad to be here with you.
Well, we're really delighted to have you here, especially it's late in your day, even though it's starting early in mine in the week.
Yes.
So, Jeremiah, a good point of starting, a good point of reference, I think, would be to talk to us a little bit about your company, Collins Consulting International. Now, you're the founder and you're the managing director, but maybe tell us a little bit about what it is that you actually do.
Thank you. I founded Collins Consulting International in 2010 after being, in employment in the BPO and call contact center industry in the US and in Kenya. And what we do at Collins Consulting is we provide end-to-end turnkey solution for investors, operators, and even buyers within the BPO space. So we have a set of services geared towards operators and vendors, and then a set of services that are specifically for potential or existing buyers of outsourced services. But then also we have a third wheel, which is consulting for governments, which involves advising governments in matters BPO and outsourcing across the East African region, which covers Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania. But we've also had projects in Ghana, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, and Namibia as well.
So very much United Nations almost of African BPO. So that's great. You're definitely the man that. Yes, indeed. You're absolutely the man that we want to talk to today, Jeremiah. So to give some context for our chat, it was interesting because, as you know, a few weeks ago, CX Outsourcers, which is the annual group of BPO leaders that I co-chair along with Tracy Freeman and Mark Angus, was held in Glasgow, Scotland. Now, we talked a lot about different issues, but one of the most topical and one of the most vigorously discussed issues was the concept of emerging Africa. Now, this was during a panel chaired by Linda Arsenault, and we had a number of different thought leaders that were discussing parts of the world that were perhaps more established and ones that were more up and coming. But there was a lot of chatter about what was going on in effectively all points between Egypt and South Africa, and a lot of excitement too. So speaking from the standpoint, maybe if we kick off with Kenya, What's been driving the interest in Kenya of late? Because it seems to be, I would say, one of the countries where so many outsourcing operators are thinking now is the time to plant our flag.
Good question. There's been a lot going on in Kenya over the past, say, decade plus. When the first global BPO operator started operating in Kenya, and I'm glad that you already know about Nick Nesbitt and Ken Cole. So when they started, they were the trailblazers in this industry, and when they started off, there was nothing at all. Whether you look at it from a technology standpoint, technology to enable the growth of this industry was not there. The human capacity was zero to probably minus zero. The the policy and legislation to support the growth of this wasn't there. Now over time, there's been improvements in all of those three aspects of the industry. There's a great improvement in terms of technology. The human capacity and expertise has seen exponential growth over the last few years, and the policies that have been put in place are those that can help this industry grow. However, there could be some gaps, and there are definitely room for more policy interventions to be put in place. Now, there was an industry body in Kenya, at the very beginning. It was called Kenya BPO and Contact Center Society. That then transitioned into KITO's, Kenya IT and Outsourcing Services. But they have since gone a little bit dormant. And what that did was that it created a gap between what the private sector is doing vis-a-vis what the government needs to be doing to support the growth of this sector. So what we have seen is a very, very little, amount of support directly from the government. But then, on the other hand, the private sector has been very robust. If I can tell you, over the last, say, 5 years, there are at least 3 global BPO players that have come in and set up their base operation in Kenya. And this is specifically BPO, not coming from any other services, but for BPO. And that is a huge, step if you look at, the trajectory for growth of a sector. And what needs to be done is just to keep that number rising, and then have the public sector a little bit more involved to help and to help get this moving.
Okay, so that raises an interesting point, Jeremiah. You've talked a little bit about the robustness of the private sector. You've talked about the dynamism, and I think that's really important. In your view, how is the government of Kenya responding to the needs of the BPO industry, both for existing players and also from the standpoint of encouraging new players to set up shop in Kenya?
Good question. Now, the government, on paper, has very good intentions for developing, and right now in Kenya specifically, we're looking at it, and the word for it is digital economy. The government has a very, very good policy document for developing the digital economy, and part of that program is BPO sector. Very, very critical because of its capacity to create mass employment, capacity for export of services, and all the good things that comes with the BPO industry for a country. But now the big problem here is what I mentioned. That's why I brought up the issues of Kenya BPO and Contact Center Society and KITOs. The private sector, everyone is operating within the existing policy framework, and within their own little cocoon, doing whatever they need to do to get their businesses running. But there is a lack of uh, a concerted, effort and lobbying for the sector from the private sector, because there is no single voice that can go in and say, hey, look, tell the government, hey, look, this is what we want to do. And the reason we cannot do it is because of 1, 2, 3, 4 incentives, or financial breaks or something like that. That missing link is what is really sort of stagnating the growth of the industry in Kenya. And in all honesty, since Kenya started this in 2004, we should not be still being considered as an emerging destination. We should be somewhere very close to a mature destination at this point, if everything had been moving, in the right direction. But I'm afraid to say that's the reality. There is a bit of interest from the government. They realize that there is something that needs to be done, but then they don't have a way to directly engage the private sector and say, okay, this is what needs to be done. Can we all then agree how to synergize and then and get the results we desire? So that missing link is what's really being a big challenge at the moment.
So let's talk a little bit about Kenya's competitive advantages. And as you say, it's a market that's been on the stage in varying degrees since 2004, roughly about the time I got involved in the contact center in the CX industry. What would you say, Jeremiah, are Kenya's competitive advantages when we're thinking back to our MBA classes from the mid-1990s, and we'd be thinking about comparative strengths, comparative weaknesses? Why would an organization doing CX pick Kenya as opposed to, say, Egypt or South Africa that might be closer to home, or even far-flung destinations like Mexico, India, the Philippines?
Kenya's strengths are three-pronged, I should say. First, I would say technology-wise, we have in Kenya exists some of the best technology, infrastructure. If you compare to the rest of the region, we are way ahead of everyone else. Globally, we are very competitive. And when you look at it, even from, say, for example, somebody who is doing a voice-based BPO service, the cost per call in Kenya is actually right now lower than a call from Kenya to, say, maybe even the US or even the UK is a lot less than what it would cost if you are making the same call from India or even Philippines, for that matter, right? So that, and then also just in terms of internet connectivity and infrastructure, telco infrastructure, I think we have the best. So one advantage you have is in terms of technology. The second one is with regards to the technical skills. We have a very good, academic and educational system that churns out, people, youths, I should say, who are able to, understand and look at the world, from a global perspective and be able to relate with most other, regions of the world. That is one. And then two, specific again to the BPO, there had been, before some, deliberate efforts by the private sector to develop BPO capacity, something that I participated in a few years back. We developed the Kenya BPO and Contact Kenya BPO Center of Excellence, and we've churned out BPO ready, staff over the last 5 years or so. So in terms of skills, we have a bit of an upper hand compared to most of the regions, most of the countries in the region. Then the other the other strength we have is the political stability in the country. Yes, there's a lot of a lot of noise coming from the political class, but we are usually very stable. 99% of the time we are very comfortable with existing regimes and even transition from one to the next, so businesses can actually be able to project their existence and and viability over periods of time. And then also, of course, that comes with very good fiscal policies that are not really BPO specific but generally business friendly. We have some of the best laws around international business and global business. So I would say those are some of the three top advantages we have, but there are others that I can go on and on and on and on.
Well, you probably could go on and on because you're literally right at the heart of this, Jeremiah, and we really appreciate your insights around Kenya. So, flipping the coin to the other side, can you talk to me a little bit about what you see as the biggest challenges for the BPO sector from a Kenyan perspective over the coming 12 to 18 months?
The biggest challenge right now would be probably one, I would say, the disjointedness in this space, where if you are to operate, you'll just be running your business, and if there's another person running a BPO next door to you, you have no way of talking together and saying, hey, look, we are creating 10,000 jobs between the two of us. Can we have this and this and that in terms of subsidies or rebates or whatever it is that you need to enable you to grow your numbers? That is a big challenge, because this is this industry where the cohesiveness plays a very big role in the growth and advancement of the sector. That is one. And then two, the BPO space and the BPO, actually, I should say, client needs are constantly changing. Client needs are constantly shifting. We are running a risk of not being toe to toe with these constantly changing client requirements. So if I can tell you that everything I've said about Kenya today is very true, but whether we'll keep up with that over the next 5-10 years is something that we cannot say. So that change in client requirements or in trends is something that most clients might look at as a threat, because you might be here for one reason, then the next 2 years that reason is not the same, but the providers or the vendors haven't transformed with you at the same rate. So that's a threat. Then also in terms of, yes, we have a very good technology infrastructure and all, but then sometimes the client requirements with regards to technological skills might be a little bit of not be up to scratch in most cases.
So let's think a little bit about emerging Africa. And a few months ago, we had a guest on talking a little bit about their own BPO experience, their own experience as a provider growing in the region. And at the outset of our chat today, Jeremiah, you spoke a little bit about what some of the key countries were that were popping up. You talked a little bit about Ghana, a little bit about Tanzania, Rwanda, etc. What would you say would be the biggest pushes right now for both outsourcers and their clients to be thinking about Central African countries as destinations, as a point of diversification, as we said, away from maybe some of the more traditional spots where there's been an extended period of large volumes of workstations, places like India, Mexico, the Philippines, etc.?
Another good question, and I guess what you ask me in essence is the unique selling point for these destinations. compared to the rest of the markets out there. I would try and narrow it down to just Kenya and maybe a little bit of Uganda and Rwanda, and I would stick to one, skills, availability of the skills, the workforce that would need a very little tweaking or refining, to be BPO ready. That's one. Two, for the case of like Kenya and Uganda, and with regard specifically to say the UK buyer market, the historical backgrounds between the two with those countries is something that would be sort of an advantage. And again, also going back to skills, I talk about I want to be specific about accents, I should say. I think that in this region there is a very well polished accent, English speaking accent, that would really be pleasant to to any buyers from anywhere across the world. And of course, that's a challenge with some other regions of the world. I think also another thing that would be an attractive would be, but is not necessarily an attractive position, is really just the political climate, political and business climate in this region. We have fairly stable, political environments in this region, and it's easy to set up business and project, existence 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And then also, of course, the physical environment as well.
That all makes sense. And I think it speaks really, really significantly to the fact that so many companies in the BPO space and their clients, respectively, are really trying to find new destinations that are going to really afford that level of accessibility, of stability, and quite frankly, diversification away from some of the more established spots. And quite frankly as well, Jeremiah, this is something that we've been witnessing in emerging parts of, say, Central or Eastern Europe. We've been seeing it in parts of the Caribbean and Latin America. And I really think it speaks to a large degree to the extent to which business continuity at BCP has become such a watchword in some of the key demand markets of late.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, BCP is I think no one wants to be, constantly moving or shifting. So if you can get a sense of being able to run a business over projected 10, 15, 20 years, I think it creates a lot of confidence in the eye of the buyers. And that is something that I'm very proud to say is a selling point for Kenya. That continuity is guaranteed. You can always plan your business knowing it's going to be there for some time.
Well, Jeremiah, this has been an absolutely fascinating discussion, and I wanted to thank you very much for spending some time, as I mentioned, at the end of your day. I know that it's traffic time in Nairobi is never an easy thing to get home to, but it's really nice of you to chat with us. And we look forward to having you back on soon. But before we go, can you just let our listeners know where, if they have any questions about Kenya or any other parts of emerging Africa, how can they get a hold of you?
Thank you. Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to give you my email, but my email is jokello35@yahoo.com. If you shoot me an email with questions regarding Kenya or the whole of the African region, I should be able to answer questions. I should be able to provide more insights. We have documents, write-ups that can always be able to share with anyone who is interested, just in terms of with regards to getting more information about this region. And if anyone is interested in exploring the possibility of setting up base of operation or engaging, a vendor in this region, will be on hand to help you do the due diligence and do the verification of those vendors, be able to give you an unbiased, position of the same.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Jeremiah. We wish you all the best,
Right.
and we will speak to you soon.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I was able to speak with you today.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.